In this video, we're going to look at Higher Human Biology Unit 2, Physiology and Health, Key Area 5, the structure of arteries, capillaries and veins. Our learning intentions is to look at how blood pressure changes as blood moves away from the heart through the vessels, give a description of the different layers of the walls of the artery, talk about how veins and arteries differ in terms of structure, give reasons why capillaries benefit from having thin walls in their endothelium, explain how the body uses vasodilation and vasoconstriction, describe the role of pressure filtration in the exchange of substances in the tissues, and explain how fluid is removed from the tissues. We'll then look at the composition of tissue fluid and blood plasma. So, as blood leaves the heart, it travels through the aorta to the body. This is through an artery. So the highest pressure is when the blood is leaving the heart, and it does this through the arteries. As it travels out along the arteries, it breaks into smaller vessels called arterials, which are not covered by the course, and then further and further and further until we get to the capillary layer. There's a certain amount of pressure still maintained at this point, which we'll come into at the end of this video with pressure filtration. However, most of the pressure has gone. Then through the venous return system, the pressure is low, and we get back to the heart where pressure is applied again. So blood pressure will decrease as we move away from the heart through the arteries, the capillaries, the veins. So the structure of the heart, the structure of the arteries, capillaries and veins. So this shows the movement of blood, as we've just described, away from the heart along the arteries, through the smaller arterioles, through the capillary bed, exchange of tissues, and through the venules and the veins. The structure of these three vessel types, the arteries, the veins, and the capillaries, are similar in a lot of respects, but differ in some very important ways. The endothelial layer is found in all three types. The capillary is the simplest of the vessels, and it is really just composed of an endothelial layer, which gives the inner hole, which is called the central lumen, which is present in all three vessel types, and then you have the area on the outside. We have the central lumen, which I've discussed is this inner hole formed by the endothelium. We have connective tissue found in both the arteries and the veins. Now, this is the outermost layer of the vessel. You see it's absent from the capillaries here. So the outermost layer is the connective tissue. It contains some elastic fibers which give a certain amount of stretch. On the central layer, we have the smooth muscle. Now you'll notice that on the artery, the smooth muscular layer is a lot thicker than a vein of the same size would have. This gives the vein a much larger central lumen than an artery of that size. Veins benefit from the addition of valves, which are not present in arteries or capillaries. We've talked about the fact that blood has lost a lot of its pressure by the time the liquid gets to the vein. The vein, therefore, if you think about return of blood from your foot to your heart, it needs a way that when the liquid is moving, it can move up the vessel, and then when there's no pressure applied, the liquid does not fall back down, what we call backflow of blood. Liquid is moved in the venous system through the movement of your smooth muscles. So when, for example, if we take the veins of the leg, when your muscles in your legs move, they squeeze the veins and push the blood further along, and when the muscles relax, the backflow is prevented by these valves. So in arteries, we have the connective tissue on the area on the outside, the smooth muscles on the inside, and we have the endothelium and the lumen. So this elasticity of the arterial walls is especially useful because, as we've said, it is where the highest amount of pressure is. So this elasticity allows it to recoil and accommodate the surge of blood after each contraction of the heart. The smooth muscle, so this inner layer, allows the control of blood flow to different parts of the body. So these muscles can contract and go through what's called vasoconstriction, and that allows the body to prevent a large amount of blood going to a certain part of the body, or the smooth muscles in the wall of the artery can relax and allow a large amount of blood to flow to a particular area. Capillaries, we've already talked about, have this thin endothelial wall. They benefit from the fact that this allows easy diffusion of nutrients in and out of the capillary, and the easy diffusion of liquids out of the capillary bed. We'll talk again about pressure filtration in the next slide, and this again, the thinness of the walls of capillary are benefiting when we're doing pressure filtration. The three structural differences that we need to know for the course, we've mentioned them already, between the veins and the arteries are that the veins have a much thinner muscular wall than the arteries, that the veins have a wider central lumen, therefore, than an artery of the same size, and that they have these valves to prevent the backflow of blood. We then look at the next section, which is tissue fluids. So we're looking at the exchange of materials between tissue fluids and cells. So we have this thing called pressure filtration. The high pressure of the arterial flow, we're coming along the artery, it's got these smooth muscles which allow it to withstand the pressure, and then suddenly the fluid is going into the capillaries, which we discussed have this thin endothelial wall. The high pressure causes the movement of the liquid out through the capillary walls and into the area around the tissue. So this makes what we call the tissue fluid, which supplies cells with glucose, oxygen, and other substances. Carbon dioxide and other metabolic waste products can diffuse out of the cells, and they can go into the tissue fluid. Much of the tissue fluid then returns to the blood. So it's been pressure filtrated out as it comes along. It's moved out. You can see here the food has been pushed away. It'll then exchange oxygen nutrients with the tissue and take up the waste products. And then the liquid, which is over here at the venous side, will then be absorbed back into the blood plasma, and then will move through the contraction of smooth muscles and the valves, preventing backflow back towards the heart. Any fluid that is not picked up by the venous return system is picked up by what are called lymphatic vessels. This is an additional blood vessel type that's not mentioned at National 5. These vessels absorb the excess tissue fluid and return it as lymph to the circulatory system. That is all that's required for you to know about the lymphatic system for the course. Tissue fluid, so the fluid which is in the arteries, maintained in the capillaries to some extent, and then which is moved back through the veins to the heart, that differs in a few different ways from the tissue fluid. So the blood plasma, which is in these blood vessels, differs in some ways to the tissue fluid that is pressure filtrated out. Because the capillaries are permeable to the waters and the dissolved nutrients, these can move out, so the tissue fluid and the blood plasma will both contain liquid and nutrients and waste products. The larger proteins, such as enzymes, hormones, red blood cells, these kind of things, are unable to get through the walls of the capillary. So the blood plasma will have a higher concentration of plasma proteins because these are too large to be filtered through the capillary walls. We, as a little bit of a throwback, have talked about in an inflammatory response, the capillaries becoming more permeable. If you then join this to pressure filtration, that explains why it is that these white blood cells are able to then leak into the tissue fluid. It's because we have allowed the capillaries to become more permeable, and this has increased the amount of tissue fluid in the inflammatory response. Hopefully, we understand the learning intentions, so we know that blood pressure decreases as you move further away from the heart through the arteries, then the capillaries and veins. We know that the layers of wall of the artery, we have the connective tissue with elastic fibers on the outside. We have the smooth muscular walls on the inside. The elasticity of both these tissues allow the recoil when the heart pushes high pressure blood plasma through the arteries. The smooth muscles in the walls of the arteries also allow it to vasoconstrict and vasodilate. We have the veins and arteries differing in the terms of veins having valves and having a thinner muscular wall of smooth muscle in their walls. We have the reasons that the capillary benefit from having thin walls in their endothelial, being it allows pressure filtration and it allows the diffusion of nutrients in and out. We have talked about vasodilation and vasoconstriction as something that smooth muscles in the arteries can do. We have described the role of pressure filtration and the exchange of substances in the tissues, so it pushes the fluid out containing nutrients and oxygen. We have explained that fluid is removed from the tissues by being absorbed back into the venous end of the capillaries or being absorbed by the lymphatic system and moved back to the circulatory system. We've compared the tissue fluid and blood plasma containing plasma proteins, which are too large to get into the tissue fluid. There are some other chemical composition differences, but none required for the course. Hopefully that made a bit of sense. If there's anything that is still difficult, please do contact me and ask.